flag salute. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to have Barbara read the Open Public Meetings Act.
Pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting was forwarded to the official township newspapers, posted on the bulletin board and township website on November 3rd, 2022. This meeting is being videotaped and will be on channel 9.
Roll call.
Mrs. Lane?
Here.
Mr. Key?
Here.
Mr. Mark?
Yes. Here.
I'd like to get a motion for the first public portion for resolutions and ordinances below.
Motion. Public portion. Second.
I see no one coming forward. I'd like to close it. All in favor of closing the motion? Or all in favor of closing public portion?
I'll make a motion to close it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve the correspondence and reports.
Make a motion to approve the correspondence and reports. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from March 14th, 2023?
Motion to approve minutes. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I get a motion to approve the bill list?
Motion to approve bill list. Second.
Barb?
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R8623, appointing Christina Mulford as the full-time administrative assistant.
Motion R86-23. Second.
Roll call. Sorry.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R8723, appointing Megan Pustizzi as full-time administrative assistant.
Motion R87-23. Second.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R8823, authorizing the hiring of Ryan Waltimyer as the SLEO Class 2 officer.
Motion for R88-23. Second.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R8923, granting the renewal of the towing licenses within the Township of Franklin for 2023 to 2025.
Motion for R89-23. Second.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R9023, regarding the renunciation of any and all actual or potential interest in ownership of Block 4301, Lot 1 in the Township of Franklin.
Make a motion for R90-23. Second.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R9123, regarding the renunciation of any and all actual or potential interest in the ownership of Block 4301, Lot 2 in the Township of Franklin.
Motion for R91-23. Second.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R9323, awarding lawn maintenance service agreement for the Franklin Township Recreation and Administration properties for 2023 to Lawn Connection, West Berlin.
I'll make a motion R93-23. Second.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R9423, PBA Local 122, Patrolman and Corporals Memorandum of Agreement for January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2025.
Motion for R94-23. Second.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R9523 for AFSCME Collective Bargaining Agreement Addendum and Salary Guide Adjustment for calendar year 23 through 25.
Motion R95-23. Second.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion for R9623, tax exemption for a totally disabled veteran.
Motion R96-23. Second.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Key?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
I'd like to get a motion to open the second public portion for any comments.
Make a motion. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Seeing no one come forward?
Sorry, huh? I tried to let everybody else go first.
I see someone coming forward.
Dave Marshall, 67 New Road, Malaga. Hello. Obviously, one of the things I was going to talk about tonight has been removed off the agenda, so I do have a couple general questions in reference to that, but I have a couple other ones outside of that. One is the minutes from previous meetings. There's about 18 different meetings that have no minutes posted between last year and this year. I don't know, is there a certain timeline, guideline, something that's supposed to be followed for, that when they're supposed to be posted?
Township committee?
I got Township Committee, Planning Board, Zoning, EDC. I can give you all the dates if you
All of
want.
them are missing?
Well, no, different dates.
Oh, okay.
Most of them from this year. There's a couple that, Township Committee is the only one that actually has most of this year's on there. There's some from last year missing. And other than bringing up a request for them, shouldn't they have been posted by now?
We'll check into it for you. At this time, I was unable to tell you.
I understand. I just didn't know if there was, I didn't know if Mr. Lyons had anything to add to this. Normally there's something when there's a timeline involved.
Just see, go line by line, see which ones are not posted. See if there's a reason for not getting them.
Okay. I figured they can be. I just didn't know, what is the timeline that's supposed to be for posting? Is there anything official that's supposed to happen, like through the Sunshine Law or anything that way?
Yeah, it's supposed to be made available as soon as practical. So I'm not aware of each of the detailed dates and whatnot and what the reason is, so I'd have to look into it.
Okay. All right, just curious, and I can email them to all of you or somebody, just to let you know what's going on there.
Certainly send you when you come.
Yep. Any progress on the dollar store near me? We've the different things that we've talked about, complained about. The lights haven't been fixed. The trash is still all over the property. Just wondering what's going on.
We had the code enforcement officer go out there. We did have a zoning officer look into it also. We sent them another letter. We are in the process of waiting to give them a citing if they don't correct based on the letter and the penalties.
Okay. Is there anything, and again, I've done the complaints here, not, I haven't been down there to put a formal one in lately. Is there anything that, like, say if somebody does a complaint, isn't there supposed to be a notification or anything done to the person that complains that things are in process, just so I don't have to keep asking?
I would usually call at the end when something,
Okay.
like I know you had talked about the retention pond.
Right.
So I have talked from time to time with the gentleman who brought that up, and Mr. Nicholson from DPW is working on that, and we're working on it with CME. The problem with that retention pond is very much like the one on Lacey Ray. We need to involve the state with it because of the money and everything that has to be done to it. So I do reach out to him because it's just a long process. But things like yours, I would wait until we have some type of resolution or something I can go forward with and say, listen, we've gone through the process of notifying the owner. We've given them 10 days to correct. They were given another notice, and now they've been summoned and they'll be coming to court.
Right. Like I said, I was just curious. I wasn't sure, what steps had to be followed. And
if you make the complaint at that, at the podium, I write it down and I handle it the next day.
Right.
So there's no need to come down and file it.
I appreciate that. Yep. Now, as for the general questions in reference to cannabis, obviously we have the one tonight that was pulled off, from the 1986 Delsey Drive. I'm aware of the other one on the 4081 Lake Road. I don't know how far that has gone along, how far it hasn't. The Viscotti brothers. I don't know if that's is there any other ones? I've heard there's going to be one right down the street from us on Delsey Drive. I've heard there's going to be 2 or 3 along Route 40. Now, these are rumors, so I'm asking.
Visconti Brothers was going on before I came here.
Right.
1986 has just begun the process. We have heard the same thing, people calling, questioning, what the township stand on it is. We refer them back to what was done in 2021. And
yeah, there have been additional inquiries.
Okay.
And as Mr. Finley was saying, we're in the process now with the transition in staffing to address those.
All right. Nothing that can be divulged at this point in time on which properties are being looked at?
Not that I have at my fingertips, but there are additional ones.
All right. The other question I have is, I understand, if I'm not mistaken, that the ordinance on what we ruled on with the different classes, 1 through 4 were approved, 5 and 6 were not. That only stands for 5 years, correct? And then it can be, at that point in time, it has to be or can be changed or voted on again?
Well, now, what happens is correct, is that you're locked in for a 5-year period for prohibitions. And so there's or allowed, you can't can't retract that. So it would be back to the governing body at that point.
Okay, but the reason I'm asking is obviously with the retail side, I don't live that far, as you know, from the one down in Vineland, and we see some of the side effects of the retail side there. And that's obviously with not having it is a good thing, right now I feel, and that's personal opinion. But I know in 5 years that could change, and that's why I'm asking. I want to make sure what I understood of the ruling was correct.
Well, I don't know if I understand the question.
In 5 years, could retail be allowed? Because right now it is not.
Yes.
Okay, and that's what I was getting towards, right?
Okay, just want to make sure I understood the
Yep.
question.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can't lay you off that easy, Heather. Harry Kennedy, 1578 Friars Mill Road. I was watching, enjoying my evening TV of the latest planning board meeting. And one of the resolutions that came out of that planning board was asking the Township Committee to explain to the planning board where the new properties other than Fazland came from, and asking them to examine those properties. And I wondered if that had been communicated officially to you by the planning board, or unofficially, or in any way talked about?
First
No.
time I'm here.
First.
Mr. Borelli sent it to me.
Did he? Good. So you'll make a recommendation one way or the other. The Township Committee will or will not, or you have a recommendation, Mr. Lyons?
Well, I'll submit it. I don't
No,
take a vote, but I'll submit it for review by the Township Committee. I spoke to Mr. Borelli about it yesterday, about the nature of it, and
Fine.
he relayed it and forwarded it in writing, as Mr. Kennedy had said.
Good. Thank you. I think that might be an interesting investigation. As a very young Township Committeeman many, many years ago, before most of you were born, I got to be the chairman in my first year, Mr. Kane, of the Special Investigating Committee investigating allegations at the local school board, Ms. Flame. So it's something that a Township Committee can do, and it might be an exciting adventure to find out exactly how the Roan property began to be investigated, how we arrived from owning it to not owning it, how we went to a quitclaim deed, how the taxes were computed, if that's what we want to call that payment, taxes. I don't know under what basis we call it that, but whatever. And then finally, as to whether or not there's an option on that property, as according to Mr. Roan that there is. It would be fascinating to see who the owner of that option is and when it was exercised, and that it goes for 2 years is what I've been told. So again, the information, the background, the long-term permutations of that property aren't over, obviously. We're going to be going through a master plan revision, and this Township Committee can always introduce zoning ordinances and change ordinances and allow things that aren't allowed at the present time. So it's a fascinating process to at least think about how exactly we got there. Was Mr. Roan directly involved? Was his law firm, or who exactly was doing the negotiation? Because it was fascinating to listen to Mr. Roan discuss it. The other question I had, and I don't know that Barb will know this off the top of her head, but the RFPs that went out for the different requests for professional services that you voted on at the reorganization meeting, there was one that was somewhat different than previous years, and that was the request for proposals that involved the project engineer / zoning board solicitor. I wondered if that was the first time that RFP had ever been sent out in that form, Barb, that you know of.
What was the question?
The question was the RFP for a special project engineer / zoning solicitor. Zoning, no, you're right, not zoning solicitor. Mike wouldn't like that. Yeah, zoning engineer.
I'll have to look at it.
Okay, you count off the top of your head, you don't recall, though. In my many years in government and serving as the mayor and on the chairman of the planning board, I never recalled it being sent out that way. And I know that you did hire a new firm, and I remember the mayor saying it was the purview of the zoning board. But the mayor, who very rarely makes mistakes, made a slight mistake on that one. You voted on it first. You hired them as your special project engineer, at your reorganization meeting. And I was just wondering if anybody here had any previous dealings with that engineering firm in any form whatsoever before they were hired. That would apply to senior staff as well as members of the Township Committee. Anybody have any previous dealings with that engineering firm?
The name, refresh my memory.
Schaefer, Shadig, Nasser, or Schaefer, Nassig, Nassib, Shadig,
I'll stop you.
Schaefer, Nasser. Yeah,
No.
they're in Mays Landing. They're right. Yeah. Nobody can recall ever having any dealings with that engineering firm.
Not that I can recall.
Okay, so it was a request for proposals that you got. They put in a proposal to be your engineer and to also be the zoning board engineer, and nobody up here remembers ever having any dealings with them. Good, thank you very much.
Good evening, Nancy Kennedy, 711 St. George Street. I had occasion to tune into the zoning board meeting, and I found it especially interesting because there was a vote that was taken at the meeting that I viewed that pertained to the property across the street from where I grew up, which is where my parents still live. And the Grachowski family has owned that property for a long time, and for a long time have been interested in allowing solar panels to be placed on that property. Now, interestingly, it's my understanding that Committeeman Doyle farms that property and has a somewhat vested interest in maintaining that farm land as opposed to land that's used for solar. And the reason that I find it notable, and I would ask the committee to look into it and to ask questions whenever you get an opportunity, certainly doesn't have to be tonight, is because it appeared that one of the zoning board members, maybe even arguably the deciding vote to keep the Grachowskis from being able to do what they want with their land, may be an employee of Committeeman Doyle. So if there is a conflict there, and I can't swear that the man still works for him, this town can be a rumor mill sometimes, but I just ask all of you to please take a quick look at that when you get an opportunity and make sure that there's not a conflict. And on a more positive subject, the meetings have been a little contentious and I haven't had an opportunity, but Committeeman Marsh, I was very touched when our new lieutenant was sworn in by your joy, your just overwhelming joy at the fact that he had been promoted and at his excitement at having you get to be the one to swear him in. And I know that you told me that you trained him, that you were a mentor for him. And I thought, wow, maybe we wouldn't have so many employees quitting in droves in town hall if we can have the kind of leadership that you showed be extended to the main building. I get calls periodically as a former participant, and just to put Committeeman Doyle's mind at rest, I have no desire at all, and all of yours, in coming back. But I do get calls occasionally, and it seems people are very unhappy in that building, and anything you can do to extend that kind of leadership that we clearly saw would certainly be appreciated. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good evening, Leah Vassalli, 560 Delsey Drive. The questions I was going to ask today, I'm not going to ask because the person I was going to ask them to is obviously not here. But I am curious, Harry had mentioned the zoning board meeting, which I also saw on YouTube. I'm curious, is Channel 9 back up on regular television? Or
Yes.
Okay. My question is, how do the three of you feel about the investigation that the planning board is asking the township committee to make?
Let me just to clarify, I'm not sure that's exactly what the correspondence from Mr. Borelli said.
I'm just saying what I saw. It looked like there was a motion by Jim Kelly
At the planning board level?
at the planning board level to basically investigate where the referral of the properties for the redevelopment zone came from. And the motion was seconded, and the entire planning board voted unanimously to do that. And I'm curious what the three of you feel about it.
The way it's worded from Mr. Borelli, and I'll have to clarify it with him based on the way it's being, I didn't read the meeting, was that if there are future referrals, that information be provided to you.
Yeah, I don't think that was what the motion actually was, but I'm curious.
I'm not going to say it wrong.
Yeah.
But,
And I don't want to argue hypothetical, so I'll just ask directly, how do the three of you feel about investigating where the referral came from?
I feel that we have placed great people on our planning board and zoning board. And if they're requesting information from us, then I feel my due diligence would have to be in their favor of what they're requesting and to try to get to the bottom of it.
Thank you. And Mr. Keene, Mr. Marsh?
I second that. I mean, we do have good advisory board people. I'm happy for all of our volunteers on our advisory boards, and I'm not a liaison to the planning board and obviously not on the zoning, but if they were to make recommendations for us to review, then I will review those.
I assume the head nodding is the
I
same.
agree.
Well, that's good to hear, because the three of you, are a majority on Township Committee, and I think everyone wants to know, exactly the backstory to how those properties came to be considered for a redevelopment zone that turned out to be a little bit of a mess all around. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chris Sayers, 184 Malaga Lake Boulevard. I just have some questions. I'd come here last week at the planning board meeting where they were supposed to discuss our affordable housing obligations report that CME had done that kind of explained it a little bit. I don't know if a lot of these questions I have, I guess maybe are legal questions. Maybe Mr. Lyons could just genuine. Did you have were you active in the negotiations with the Fair Share Housing Center? Okay,
It's been a very, very
long, yeah.
One of actually the longest in the entire state.
Yeah, I believe we were like the second to last or something to settle with.
Yeah, it was through a series of four, I think, separate attorneys that we had.
Okay, now this settlement, I believe it voted on this past summer to accept the settlement, or
It was voted on. I couldn't give a specific date.
yeah, specific, but it was voted on. So, and these are they're not gotcha questions, they're just genuine, just inquiries. Let's see. So, a lot of times when the townships settle with like the Fair Share Housing Center, is so that they can prevent builder's remedy lawsuits, which is basically a builder come to the community and sue the town, saying that they're practicing exclusionary zoning, and they sue the township. And basically, when you settle with these organizations, and correct me, Mr. Lyons, if I'm wrong at all, but when you settle and make a settlement, it prevents the ability for these builders to sue the town. So it gives us a sort of a hedge.
Yeah, what happens
of liability.
There's a repose period for the settlement period, which if we ever perfected, only runs at this point till the end of 2025.
So we only have like immunity to lawsuits till 2025.
Yeah, and the thing
So
is,
2 years.
during the pendency of this entire litigation, we have received a series of temporary reposes from Judge Becker.
Okay.
We have actually now outlasted Judge Becker. The litigation that's gone longer than his career, so he's, I believe, retired. We've been assigned to a different judge at this point.
So after 2 years, after 20, look, I mean, we're supposed to build 657 units of affordable housing from basically that were supposed to have been built from 1999 till 2025. And obviously, I don't think anybody thinks that we're going to build 657.
Yeah, I don't know if the term "supposed to build," but there's
That's our share.
There's a calculation of the large towns. Some of the large towns, or wealthy towns, litigated the calculus as to how the first, second, and third round units were calculated.
Yeah.
They spent a lot of money doing that, and it was not a favorable outcome.
Is that formula public? Like, is there like a formula where X plus Y equals?
The Karchman opinion would be available, certainly. The thing is that what as you described, the builder's remedy suits take, as long as they propose, which they always do, inclusionary housing, they go wherever they want. There's absolutely there's very little or no input from the municipality. So the other two issues we've dealt with is a durational adjustment, recognizing the current just impracticability, complete almost impossibility
Without sewer.
To build any kind of large-scale development. So the builder's remedy lawsuits would allow anything that's more than 5 units to seek that relief and to really force our hand.
Okay, so we have 2 years of immunity, basically. Some semi-immunity. I guess.
If there's a completion of all our obligations and we do everything we need to do, the immunity of this round extends to 12/31/25.
And so is there anything that our officials can do or the people can advocate for to change any of the agreements in the settlement, or now that it's statutorily agreed to, there's nothing that we could do without obviously subverting the settlement and then it's null and void, or legally, is there I believe the committee has to vote on certain aspects and the planning board is going to vote on certain. If they choose not to, what is the legal ramifications of that?
The legal ramification to that would be pretty straightforward. What happens at the end of the whole process is a compliance hearing that's conducted by the judge, which there's been a special master, as there always is, appointed to this, and she oversees the compliance, and there's an adversarial relationship, so to speak, in the litigation, not personally, but with the representatives of Fair Share Housing Center. The original demand, for lack of a better term, from them was closer to 1,000 units.
Yeah. And we negotiated down to 657.
Well, we negotiated, but we also did a lot of work. My predecessors did a lot of work. There were, and I can't give specifics, but there were allowances or recognition of units already existing in town. And that was very complicated, very time consuming to get quote credits for those units.
Yeah.
And that was debated, and I wouldn't even really call it negotiated. It was more of the township.
It's hard to negotiate with a gun to your
I'm not casting spurs any ill will towards Fair Share. They've been very professional, and but the township and the township committee through the authorization did the work to have those units recognized to at least lower the quote ultimate number.
Okay. And can I just ask you one question, and then I promise I'll be really brief, if that's okay. I know my time is up. I appreciate it. So currently...
I never finished.
No, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off.
The ultimate, but to answer your question, if there's not compliance, if the items, the closeout items don't occur for whatever reason, then what occurs is the lifting of our temporary repose.
Okay. So then we lose that immunity.
We would lose that immunity for the remainder of the round and be subject to, again, the builder's remedy lawsuits.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I thought when you stopped, sorry. And right now, currently, I don't know if Mr. Lyons knows this or not, there are 13 municipalities that are suing Governor Murphy, and I don't think it's for political reasons necessarily. Basically, from what I understand, legally COA still exists, even though the courts have called it defunct and moribund.
Well, Governor Christie
didn't nominate anybody to. Right. Yeah. So, but they're currently suing Governor Murphy to force him, because legally he's still required to assign people to the COA board. And these 13 municipalities are trying to get the court system to some extent. Because the court system's overburdened by all these affordable housing, because every municipality has to go through the courts to do it. So it's overburdening the court system. It's a very clunky way. It seems like let me
address that.
Yeah.
It's important. First of all, yes, there's 13, I believe, at last count, municipalities making that challenge. But the core of the challenge is not that we shouldn't have this obligation.
No. It's to streamline the process.
It should be addressed through a COA.
Through COA.
Instead of the Superior Court. I will say that based on our timing, we didn't run into that situation that other towns ran into. They ran into a situation where you would go in on a Friday and there would be 14 municipalities with quote affordable housing matters before the court. We miss that. We get the full
Attention.
Absolutely, and Judge Becker was very instrumental in moving it forward. Was always available, made a priority of our case, but also when we had difficulties, not difficulties, but when we were in that lengthy process on units, as long as we represented and we could show we were making an earnest effort, that's how we got 7 years into a 10-year repose period without a resolution.
Yeah.
It wasn't a lack of action. It was the complexity of our municipality and the issues that needed to be addressed. So we didn't run into that problem. We didn't run into being one of 20 or 30 municipalities in a county simultaneously seeking relief.
And I think even the lawsuit, it's not asking them to change agreements from 99 to 2025. It's for the future. So it's the future requirements that it's going to cause. So as I was saying, so they're trying to sue Governor Murphy to reestablish the COA board so that you don't have to pay for the court system and all the legal fees. And I believe you have to pay the attorneys of the Fair Share Housing Center $30,000 in order for their lawyer attorneys' fees to negotiate their case against us. We have to pay them $30,000 in order to.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think every settlement and the numbers vary based on time and the amount put in.
I think that was in the settlement, if I remember correctly.
There's also, of course, again, fees that occur from the special master also.
Yeah.
It is a complex arrangement, but I don't want anyone to think that ours was interfered with by a lack of expertise or availability by the court.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
It's just, it seems like, we're kind of at the mercy of the courts. And to a certain extent, we're always going to be at the mercy to the courts. But if we can actually have a functioning COA board that has more delineated and clarified statutes of what this municipality needs to do, X, Y, and Z, and, to try and get maybe the activists out of the lawsuits that, we have to actually pay in order for them to negotiate down with us. But anyway, so they're trying to sue Governor Murphy to require him to restart this board. And I think it might be something to at least to look into to kind of get some clarity in the situation. So we're not always paying attorneys' fees, paying both sides of the argument to negotiate. So it's just something I thought I'd bring to your attention. I appreciate that. But thank you, Mr. Lyons. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one else, I'd like to close the second public portion.
Motion closed.
Second.
Committee reports. Anything?
Environmental, environmental met last night, so we had a quorum, but we had no applications to review from zoning at the meeting, so there was no applications to review on behalf of the environmental committee. We did have a semi-lengthy discussion from the public portion. We had an individual recommend that we would, from the environmental commission, to review certain lands that are up for land sales to see if they would be qualified for any specific green acres and if they had any endangered species and so on and so forth in order to preserve and just take another extra look at our land sale list before it goes out. So that was heard by the environmental commission, and they are going to consider that. And the environmental commission is planning a park cleanup in April, so be on the lookout for that. As of right now, is April 22nd, but it is subject to change, and be on the lookout. They will have that location, and I believe the chairman will start posting that around, and I'll have that date and time and location set before it occurs in the next meeting. Thank you.
Just Recreation Committee still actively and aggressively working on the golf tournament for the end of April. Easter egg hunt is Saturday, weather permitting.
Are you hiding?
Yes, right out in the middle of the field.
I like a good one.
Even I could find them. But that's basically what I have for that.
Deputy Chief DeCesare, did you need to say anything tonight? If you want to,
Sure.
you don't have to.
No, I will. I like the public to know what's going on.
Acknowledge you.
Sure. So the police department has accepted 2 grants. one from the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office and one from the Gloucester County Prosecutor's Office for DWI enforcement in Atlantic County. That starts April 1st, so we'll be out there enforcing DWI enforcement. And one for distracted driving in Gloucester County. That's a month-long program that runs from April 1st to April 30th. So officers will be out there stopping for obviously distracted driving, such as cell phones and stuff like that, texting while driving. And that is, one other thing. We announced our Police Youth Week after a 3-year hiatus due to COVID is back. That's our Youth Police Academy. That'll be June 19th to June 23rd. The application process is open right now. That's our most exciting and biggest community policing event throughout the year, and that is open to current 5th and 6th grade students in Franklin Township. And that is all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I just want to take a moment and wish everybody a very happy Easter and enjoy the time with your families. As we all know, time goes very quickly. With that being said, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a motion?
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming out and have a safe drive home.